Let's talk about our top 5, and this week's top 5 is protecting infrastructure. Now, the context here is basically running some type of an enterprise, and you have some IT infrastructure you need to protect. And so, a little bit biased here, but tendency would be to think about, system administration and how to protect that infrastructure from a security standpoint. So, let's go to you, Jim, first. And what do you think we should be doing here?
Yeah, my first tip is implement least privilege. That is, don't give everybody access to everything. Only give them access what they need to do their job. That means, don't give, me administrative access to the accounting systems kind of thing. And partition those off. Keep them in their own enclaves. The accounting system shouldn't necessarily be able to talk to the HR. I don't know. I'm just making things up here as I go. But basically, keep the systems that have the critical data, in their own little enclaves where you can protect them better.
Yep, absolutely. As we get more and more into cloud infrastructure, that notion of physically partitioning things becomes less and less. And so more and more we get into discussions about APIs and be able to interact between systems, but do it in a way that you've controlled through that API. That is, you can only access things through the means that the API facilitates, and then to have authentication associated with that so you can maintain accountability and controls in that sense. And in terms of granting user accounts, it is more work to manage least privilege. You have to define roles. You have to define who's performing particular roles, and you have to limit it to that. And the tendency over time is to we know the term feature creep, to basically have privilege creep, but it's something that you kind of have to resist or revisit and try to control over time. So, all right, Matt, let's go to you. What do you think is the next item?
For me, it's sort of the opposite. In the way, it's the reverse of what Jim is thinking. Mine's more about a user account termination and audit of existing user accounts. So if you do have that sort of privilege creep, first off, for existing accounts, you should really be trying to minimize it, knock it back down, and say maybe on a monthly or yearly basis, does everybody who has admin access to their box really need it? Does everybody need this extra privilege or need to have this network connectivity established between business unit A and business unit B? Doing that will help keep a lid on the sort of problems you were just describing. But the other is account termination. There are many reasons why you'd want to almost immediately terminate user accounts when something goes on. In particular, when you have an employee being let go. If someone's being let go and the terms are not necessarily amicable, favorable, there's some people will see that as an excuse to sabotage or steal data or do other things that they wouldn't be able to. They're already leaving the company. What can you possibly do to them is sort of the mindset. So including that, sort of tying in HR's decisions to the technical decisions and say, this guy's no longer here. These are the 20, 30, 40 accounts that you need to lock down immediately. Having that coordination is critical. So I highly recommend having that in place.
Other key piece of it is, not just when folks leave the company, but when folks have their job change, their responsibilities change. I move from Group A to Group B. Well, now I don't need admin access over on Group A's systems, so those should be shut down. So that's one of the things, your regular audit should be bringing to people's attention so that, when those job roles change, their old access that they no longer need gets taken away too.
So John, what's next on the list?
Yeah, so grant privileged access only to trusted employees, and then my little caveat in parentheses is don't trust any of your employees. No, just kidding. No, seriously,
employees are a lot more transient than they used to be.
Well, that's true.
You got hired for a career. That was where you worked, and it's not like that anymore. So I think this is a much more complicated thing than it used to be.
It is, because like you said, especially if you're a large organization, you've got people coming and going all the time. It's just better to not grant privileges only to those people who absolutely need them, and then kind of pivoting back to Jim's, only to what they actually need to have privilege access to. So don't give them the keys to the entire kingdom, even if you do trust them. Only grant them access to things that they absolutely need, but do so only in a very restricted way, because there's
Right.
very few people who really need admin to the entire domain or other such, overreaching types of administrative privileges in your organization. So really consider that carefully, and only with people that probably have been around for a while and you trust, and again, audit what they're doing to make sure they're not doing anything
Trust.
inappropriate.
Trust but verify.
Right.
And then develop that trust. I think that the notion of having somebody come in and then all of a sudden be the administrator of systems is probably not the best thing to do. To work them into that role, develop a trust relationship over time, and then see how that employee is working out would be perhaps a better, if you have the opportunity to do that.
Right.
Certainly.
So, and my third and fourth, I kind of lumped together because I segued right into my fourth, but, it is, verify these people that you've granted privilege access to, that you do some auditing to see what they're doing. You should do that on all of your users, really, to see if anybody's up to things that they shouldn't be doing, and do that on a regular basis.
I think that segues right into mine here, which is basically monitor and baseline normal. Because if you don't know what normal is, there's no way you're going to be able to notice what abnormal is. And we all here, I think, have experienced these cases where all of a sudden somebody starts monitoring network and then they're reporting all kinds of attacks. And it's like, no, that's not an attack. That's your normal behavior of your system. And so you have to really be able to recognize what normal is in order to be able to identify an abuse or an attack. And if you don't have those measurements in place, it's just not going to happen. So
We've seen situations where someone who should have been baselining probably would have caught on to some activity long before the catastrophic failures that they had. Example, if maybe your processor is running, at 50% when it's usually somewhere down at 20, that's great. We would have caught that. But when it comes to 90 and 100 and your box starts, choking and dying because somebody's using it for Bitcoin mining, you could have caught that a lot earlier.
Yeah,
Or you got someone brute forcing passwords on your SSH server, and they've been doing it for the past 8 months, but you didn't know about it, and then all of a sudden they finally got the password right. You know what I mean? So really watching what people are doing, and then like we said, we see people contact us all the time, say, hey, someone from China is trying to brute force into my machine.
Yeah.
Well, they've been doing that for the past 6 to 8 months. You just haven't. Today you decided to look.
Yeah. That's absolutely right.
Yeah, well, to back up to John's point 4 there about verifying, basically, if anybody is using elevated privileges, that what they're doing with it ought to be logged. I can't count the number of times in previous jobs where I had to deal with a critical outage because of some change that happened outside of the approved change management, and nobody knew who did it. When you're using the elevated privileges, you need to understand that all of that is going to be logged, so that when you do make changes, that can be matched back against approved change requests and that kind of thing.